Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin, Tjong-Alvares with the news from the global economy. Coming up, as Cuba opens up, both the US and the EU are ready to jump in. And Australian farmers suffered the worst drought in 100 years. First, the headlines. China's consumer price inflation rebounded in February, helped by the Lunar New Year festival, but the worries of deflation remain. Consumer prices rose 1.4% in February from a year earlier, up from a 0.8% increase in January, the lowest in 5 years. Despite the rebound in consumer prices in February, the inflation rate is still less than half of the government's target of around 3% for the year. China's official producer price index fell 4.8% last month from a year earlier, the worst result since October 2009. The producer price index has now been in deflationary territory for 3 straight years, owing to sliding domestic demand and chronic overcapacity in many sectors. The dollar rose to new multi-year highs on Tuesday as monetary and economic conditions in the US, the Eurozone, and Japan continue to diverge. The greenback hit its highest level against the euro since September 2003 in midday trading in Asia, and its highest against the yen since July 2007. Investors bought the dollar, anticipating next week's Federal Open Market Committee meeting will hint at a rate hike around mid-year. Europe and Japan, in stark contrast to the US, remain deeply hooked into stimulus. The European Central Bank kicked off its asset purchasing program earlier this week, and the Bank of Japan took extra stimulus steps in late October. European Central Bank President Mario Draghi told Greek officials they must let EU representatives return to Athens if they are ever going to obtain more aid. Draghi told Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis on Monday the government's books need to be examined to determine its financing shortfall. European finance ministers urged Greece to stop wasting time in talks, while debt-stricken Athens warned of a possible referendum if its reform plans are rejected. Eurogroup chief Jeroen Dijsselbloem said Greece won't get any more cash from its €240 billion rescue program until its official creditors are satisfied Athens is committed to all the economic fixes needed.
The real talks haven't really started yet. So the only thing I know is that's the conclusion of today. They will start on Wednesday, and they will start mainly in Brussels, and technical people will support that process from Athens. That's how we're going to do it.
Brazil's real plunged to a near 11-year low as rising political risk threatens President Dilma Rousseff's fiscal austerity plan. The real has fallen 14.5% since the start of 2015, weighed down by sliding commodity prices, a stronger US dollar, and domestic economic weakness. Political turmoil followed a speech by Rousseff seeking to convince her countrymen of the need for fiscal austerity. Just 5 months after winning a second presidential term by one of the narrowest margins in Brazilian history, Rousseff herself may also be fighting to maintain her position.
I think you have to characterize grounds for impeachment and not a third round of the election. What isn't possible in Brazil is that we won't allow for a change in the rules for democracy. The election is over. There was a first round and a second round. A third round of the election for any Brazilian citizen can happen unless you want a rupture in democracy.
The sudden U.S. engagement with Cuba has helped the European Union's own bilateral talks on improving relations with the communist-led island. But as the potential of access to Cuba's economy looks more enticing, the EU may overtake the U.S. in its involvement there.
Last week, the EU and Cuba engaged in its third set of talks over the last year to thaw the ice between the two. And in the wake of last December's announced rapprochement between the United States and Cuba, there is a race brewing between the US and EU as the potential of access to Cuba's economy looks more and more enticing.
The same thing is occurring with the United States, but there's a difference, which is that the US spent 50 years ignoring Cuba. and vice versa, while the European Union has only been at it for 25 years, half that time, and that may be an advantage.
While Spain called for a speedy trade deal between the EU and Cuba, the EU officially denied that there is a race with the US. Nevertheless, the French foreign trade minister was in Cuba over the weekend, in part to discuss terms for $15 to $16 billion Cuba owes to creditors. As well, French President François Hollande will visit in May.
We want to be working with Cuba, which is going through this economic program of opening up and modernizing. This is what France's position is, and it is all the more important following the decisions announced by Cuba and the United States on December 17th.
Meanwhile, the United States is looking at a potential boon. Cuba imports 80% of its food at a cost of $2 billion a year. It's a market that U.S. farmers have, for humanitarian reasons, been allowed to take part in to the tune of $300 million last year. Indeed, while the U.S. political climate is not as warm to the communist island as it is in the EU, the tides are shifting.
Since our announcement, the Cuban government has begun to discuss ways in which they are going to reorganize their economy to accommodate for possible foreign investment. That's already forcing a series of changes that promises to open up more opportunities for entrepreneurs, more transparency in terms of what's happening in their economy.
Official Cuban figures have growth at 4% this year as the world begins to arrive at their ports. The island's challenge will be to maintain their economic system in a decidedly different international environment.
When we unleash the power of women, we can secure the future for all. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said on International Women's Day. In the startup nation, women are actively involved as innovators, and Channel 2 economic journalist Noah Oron joins us now for a look at some female success stories. Noah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, who do we have here?
Okay, so I wanted, because, International Women's Day was this week, I wanted to start off with three women that I would say that they're, let's say, the top female entrepreneurs that I know. There are lots of them. This is probably not the best list, but I just wanted to introduce you to three of them. So the first one is Michal Tzur. She was the co-founder of Naftali Bennett's Sayota, which is it was sold for $145 million. Wow. Yeah.
Naftali Bennett, of course, being one of the people who's heading the parties in the elections coming up next week.
Yeah. So he went to politics, but she moved on to another company. So she co-founded Kaltura, one of the leading startups that are in New York right now, and they've already raised $116 million to date. And there's an IPO coming up for sure. Mm-hmm. She's a very talented woman, and Kaltura, by the way, is an open source video platform. They work with Disney, with AT&T.
Is she exceptional? I mean, do we see many women like that, or is she really exceptional in the sense that
I would say that she is definitely exceptional.
Even in Israel.
Yeah, even in Israel, because two very, very big startups. One of them was already sold, and now Kaltura, which is really big, and we're expecting this IPO. And she's also married, and she has 3 kids. And
is this why she's called the Iron Lady?
Yep, exactly. That's her nickname. And I mean, on the other hand, we have Kira Radinsky. She is not even 30. She already she started coding when she was 8, and she finished her PhD by the age of 26. Okay. So she's also yeah. And she founded Sales Predict in 2012. And basically, what they do is they can they advise salespeople on promising leads. So they can analyze the data of customers and see what they've bought before, and then analyze what they will buy in the future. So they're predicting the future. She was listed on MIT's list of 35 under 35, right. Which is very impressive.
And of course, we're talking about essentially a child prodigy. She started coding at age 8.
Yeah.
I mean, we just recently had a video report last week about the fact that coding and programming has become a mandatory part of the education in Great Britain. A country like Israel, the startup nation, why don't we have that here?
So actually, I mean, the Ministry of Education, they're considering programs like that for 3rd graders and 4th graders. Mm-hmm. They're kind of they're considering that, and that will start, I guess, next year. You'll see more of these programs.
Right.
It's not everywhere, but it's coming up, and yeah, I mean, I would
it's
assume
still for the privileged few, so to speak, initially, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, last but not least, we have Liat Aronson. She is one of the directors of the ZEL program, the ZEL Entrepreneurship Program at the IDC. It's a program for young Israeli entrepreneurs, and they already have more than 250 alumni and students currently. And she is, she is one of the directors there. She's kind of their big leader, and she made Aliyah. She's originally a lawyer, and she's a mother of 4 children, which is also very, very impressive. She's kind of the big teacher, and she's also a big she's a fan of TED Talks, and she organized 2 really big TEDx talks in Israel, which is also very, very impressive. So she's a great name to be in touch with if you want to become an entrepreneur.
Clearly, yeah. Well, I'd love to hear more stories about women, but we also have another subject here.
Yes. So next week, I have to mention that is St. Patrick's Day, and I want to talk a little bit about beer. I don't know if you like beer.
Of course, I like beer, and even green beer.
So I wanted to introduce you to Weissberger. It's an Israeli startup, and what they do is basically they track beer consumption, both for bars and for the beverage manufacturers. They work with Carlsberg, with Tuborg. They're really, really big, and what they can do is, for example, if you have a bar, they can track which beer is, mostly drank at your bar, and if you're a beverage manufacturer, they can tell you where exactly is your beer sold more than in one bar more than others.
Smart bars or smart beers or whatever. Either
exactly.
way.
That's big data in beer.
Good stuff. Big data in beer is a good thing.
Yep.
Well, Noah Aron from Channel 2, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mounting debts, despair, and forced repossessions are taking a heavy toll on farmers in parts of Australia, suffering from its worst drought in 100 years. Here are the details.
Sun-bleached bones and parched earth, indicators of a severe drought in northern New South Wales. Australia, one of the world's largest meat producers, has been sweltering after experiencing 2 of the 3 hottest years on record. Bill Murray's family has farmed here for 150 years, but the outlook is now bleak.
Well, the rainfall deficiency started in about April, May 2012, so we basically didn't get any rain from there on, but we did have a reasonable crop in 2012, or quite a good crop. But from 2013, no crop, or 14, and 15 is not looking good either.
Agricultural agent Chris Clemson has helped farmers sell their livestock for almost 2 decades. This area used to be home to more than 1 million sheep and some 90,000 head of cattle. Those numbers have plummeted as many farmers sell their stock and some give up and move on.
The last few years with no income at all, the farmers have got massive debts on machinery and also on their livestock. Their livestock numbers have dwindled that much, so I think our cattle numbers are probably back to 20% of what they were probably 10 years ago, and our sheep numbers would be down to probably 40% of what they were.
Australia is the 3rd biggest beef and veal exporter in the world. In 2013 and 14, foreign sales were worth some $5 billion. And with stricken farmers offloading their cows, prices have rocketed for those still in business.
You're looking nearly 100% increase in pricing, so you've got a lot of extra fat, so to speak. I think that's due to the lack of numbers out there due to the drought. But anybody that's had a lot of grass and has been trading cattle have done quite well. And you're now seeing the benefits of hanging in there are paramount, really. So it's very good, very good.
While some are doing well, there are calls for more assistance for those struggling. But it's already too late for many, and other farmers fear they too may have to call it a day.
And in Media Watch today, we ask whether the world is ready for the latest Apple bling. Daniel Roth, thanks for joining us. Good.
Yeah, so yesterday was Spring Forward, Apple's big event, which according to the news wires, was the biggest thing in the world yesterday. They announced all kinds of stuff, research kit, which there's a biometrics program, open source, interesting, a new laptop, which actually was the biggest deal, I think, for a lot of people, and HBO, this was huge. HBO signed a big exclusive deal with Apple TV, and Apple TV people thought wasn't going to do anything. It's already sold 25 million units.
More accessible, cheaper. It's incredible.
Yeah, and so now Apple and HBO both like to think of themselves and maybe are premium products, and so they're a natural kind of a partner. But of course, the watches. This was what everyone came to see. The watches, we found out, start at $350. They have sports watches, which is well above what other watches start at.
And they quickly go up to...
And you can get a watch for the premium watches go for $10,000.
$10,000.
Yes, these are gold watches. They don't necessarily do anything that other Apple Watches don't do, or for that matter, that Android watches don't do. But they're $10,000.
But it's 18 carats worth of gold, and it's worth it, presumably. Thank you very much for joining us. Daniel Roth, Bling from Apple. That concludes our Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares. Thanks for watching, and join us again tomorrow for more Bling.